What's up, guys? Welcome back to Joint of the Week. We are set up in the International Maker Station and we are ready to make some sawdust. Oh my God, that feels good. It's been like a month and a half since I've cut anything other than blast gates. So very exciting day. So this is a joint I actually saw at the William Ing School that he uses in a jewelry box class that he does that is really, really neat. They do it with a router there, but we're gonna hand cut it here. It's a joint I'm gonna call the Dovetailed Mitered Corner Joint. Maybe I'll come up with a better title, which will be in the thumbnail and in the title. But this is a really cool joint. It starts obviously with flat and square stock. I like to mill my stock to a number that's easily divisible by 3. So what we have is our side pieces. So if you were doing a box, you would have 4 of these and 2 of these. This is going to be your inlay piece or your highlight piece, whatever you want to call it. And one thing you want to remember is you don't want this to be too short when you're doing this first step, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to get in your vise and really hard to cut the dovetails. So we're going to go ahead and start by marking this out. My piece is 3 inches. What we're going to start by doing is setting our dividers. Because this is exactly 3 inches, I'm going to go 1/4 inch on each side. Now what's cool about this joint is it's essentially 2 sets of tails that fit into each other. That's the first step. There's no pins in this joint. So because this is 3 inches, I want 3 tails in this piece. So I'm going to first do my half tails, which are going to be 1/2 inch, and that's really easy to do because a good ruler is going to have indentations in it. We're going to set it to 1/4 inch, so I'm going to just put it in the indents of my ruler there. And I'm going to go ahead and mark out my half tails here, just 1 dot on each side. And then I'm going to open these up to 1/2 inch, which we're going to do the same way, just by fitting into the groove there, making sure that, and then we're going to start with these holes. And of course you can do this with a ruler as well, but I find dividers are a lot easier. Measure out 1/2 inch that way. And then if we did good, this should just about go in that hole. Look at that. Now we're going to take our marking knife and mark these out. Now we're going to do our gauge line here in a second, because that is that's pretty much an arbitrary measurement. I think it's just whatever you think looks good. And if you are cutting these without a Katz-Moses dovetail jig, that's something that you're going to want to draw these lines down. But because we're using the jig, we don't need to. So we're going to go ahead and get these. Boom. So now we have all our lines, and we're going to go ahead and mark our waist, which is this half tail here, and then this big tail, this big tail, and then our half tail over here. That's going to be our waist, and that gives us 3 tails here that we're going to use. And that was an airplane. We have our 2 half tails of waist and then our 2 full tails of waist here. And we're going to go ahead and mark out the other side and then get to cutting. But the thing you want to do first is we're going to measure our depth line on how deep we're going to cut. And again, this is an arbitrary measurement because it's just going to be how much your tails overlap. So for me, I think I'm going to just go ahead and go with the thickness of my board because that's easy to get to. And I think that's going to look really good for the corners. So we've got that locked in there. We're going to go ahead and mark that out. And because we have half tail waist that we're going to do, we're going to mark our side. Normally that's wouldn't be how you do it with tails. So we're going to go ahead and mark out the other side, do the same thing, and then we're going to get to cutting our tails. I'm going to breeze through it because I did a really good video called A Comprehensive Guide to Cutting Dovetails. I'm going to link that right here in the corner. Go check that video out if you're new to cutting dovetails. It has every single tip and trick I've ever learned and know about cutting dovetails, and I think it'll be really, really helpful in improving your game here. So let's get to marking this out and cutting them out. So now that we've got our tails cut and cleaned up, it's important to know that you really want these to be square and on the same plane. So take your time chiseling down to the line, because these are going to look better the more exact they are. So now what we're going to do, I should have done this earlier, I guess, but it doesn't really matter. We're going to pick our outside faces. So these are going to be my outside faces. Now we're going to take that same gauge line that we did here. We're going to transfer that to the sides of our maple that are going to be joining with our corners. And this time we're going to be keeping that half tail, so you don't need to mark the edges. So we're just going to mark here. And this is, again, the same depth we did on the other one, which is going to make these meet up perfectly at their edges. Same thing here. Okay, now you need to mark this out, and there's a variety of ways to do this. You can pick your own way, however you feel this is going to be accurate for you. But for me, what I like to do is I take something flat, I put it in my vise, and then I take my two pieces here, and this is just to support the other piece when you're marking them out. And then I take my piece that needs to be marked out and I line it up with my gauge line. And an easy way to do that is take a chisel and just drop it into your marking knife line, and then you can slide your piece up to it, and that's going to be just about perfect. I'm going to do that in the middle here. Okay, now don't let that move. But if you look straight down here, you'll see just the shadow of the top of this other board. And then what you're going to do very carefully, and you can even clamp this to the side of your bench so it doesn't move. We're going to go ahead and mark out our tops, and we're going to do this very carefully, ensuring that our board doesn't move. And the part that's most important is the part towards the top, because that's the line we're going to use to draw our top plumb line. So I'm going to get right in that corner and just give it a light scratch. We're going to darken that up in a minute. Before you forget where they are, you can take your square, drop your knife line into there, and darken it up just a little bit. And again, the most important part is right up here, because that's going to be what you use to draw your plumb line. And this is probably going to be the trickiest part of this joint, but just go slow. You have these lines that you've darkened up, and you're going to just take your marking gauge. And I talk about this pretty in depth in the video Essential Skills for Accuracy in Woodworking. I'll link that up here in the top right hand corner for you, left for me. And you put your marking knife in there, slide your square up to it, and bring that across. And that is going to show you where you're going to set your saw. It's right there in the corner. One thing that's really important to do here too is make sure that you label your original tailpiece, piece A that we already cut, with which sides which line up with which. I didn't do that yet, and that's going to be important for lining them up. So now we're going to go ahead and mark this side out over here. We're going to cut those and join them together. Now it's time to get these guys to fit. As you can see, I'm really close, but I'm going to take my time with this and just shave these down, make sure all my corners are clean, and then we're going to glue these up. This is kind of an important step, because you really want these to bottom out, because otherwise you're going to have a gap right in your corner where you don't want one. So I'm going to make sure that these bottom out before I glue it up. We're going to glue these together. So we'll glue these at the same time. This is not really something that needs clamps, but if you want, you could do one at the end to sort of push them together. But then from there, we're going to go ahead and get this board flat again. We'll joint it and plane it so that everything is nice and clean. And then we're going to go ahead and do the rest of the joinery. So I'll check back in with you when we get to that step where we're going to do the mitered corner. Now that we've got this glued up, we're gonna go ahead and true it back up. So we're gonna hit it with the jointer, and whatever we take off one side, we're gonna wanna take off the other. Just remember that. You could do that with a hand plane if you want. It's not really a big deal to do it on a jointer. And then we're gonna run it through the planer so everything's nice and smooth. And then we'll head over to the table saw and do the rest of this joinery. So let's go over to the jointer. So now it's time to cut our miters. And what I've done is you can set up a stop block on your sled, or I've made a mark here, which is where I'm gonna put the places where my two types of wood meet. Now you need to think with a 45 that you're going to have more up here than you are down here. So you wanna pick your outside face and have that be top when you're cutting. And now my thought on this is you don't want a ton of material here, but you want it to be about equal to the length of your tail. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these and then glue them up. This really came out cool. I like this technique. It was, again, an idea I saw from William Ing, which he is a really phenomenal woodworker. You should go check his channel out. He's the one who came up with the 5-cut method for square and cross-cut sleds. It's really cool. Couple things that I would have maybe changed a little bit. I think I would have made the tails both a little bit shorter. I think if they were a little bit stubbier, that might have looked cool, but I think it looks really, really good. Also, you could easily do inlay. You could do the tails twice and put an accent color in there, like Purple Heart or Wangi, something really dark that sort of would outline those tails. I think that would look really, really cool. I got a little excited when I was pounding them together. You didn't see it on camera. We were changing batteries, but I smashed my finger with that 18-ounce brass hammer from Dima, and that thing is really heavy, and it really hurt. And I was kind of in a moment of extreme pain and started hammering these together, maybe a little out of anger, maybe a little bit out of frustration, but I did get a little crack, and I wish I had just taken a little time to make it better. I think if I was doing this for a box, I probably would have. Thanks to Sean Boyd for the awesome idea for Joint of the Week. He did a really cool shop desk out of Baltic birch plywood that he released yesterday. Go check that out. It's a really good video. And of course, Sean, my neighbor and friend, is a fabulous woodworker. Guys, thanks for watching. We're back, baby. Joint of the Week. We're here. We're doing it. We're making sawdust. Very exciting. Stay safe in the shop. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.